Hi everyone, it's Andrea from Let the Cat Go. Happy first day of May, and unfortunately, this is usually our art night at Let the Cat Go studio. So every first Friday of the month, we gather normally in the studio with Sherry Byers and other instructors that teach painting, more of a step-by-step painting class. So I thought it'd be really nice to be able to see everybody's faces, but I bet you probably miss painting or me. Just kidding. Um, I am here in the studio, which is great. And I thought I was thinking of doing this live, but after sort of humming and hawing about it and thinking about the tutorials that I like to watch, I sometimes like to rewind them. And that's one of the most annoying things when you're watching somebody paint, that if you want them to slow down, in the studio, we can yell at Sherry and tell her to slow down. But here, I won't know if I'm going too fast for people. So I pre-recorded this today, and I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be doing something today that is a little bit different than the normal art nights that we have here. I can't live up to Sherry Byers. She's a great teacher, and she's fantastic with explanations, but I have a little bit of a different style. So we're going to be doing some combination of printmaking and working with negative space today. So I thought of a fresh spring painting to be able to do at home, and I'm trying to make adaptations for what you might have with you. So regardless if you're using acrylic paint, house paint, even watercolor, if you have that, some of these techniques will apply and some of them won't. So you might have to make some adaptations. Okay, so let's get started. I have here in the studio a board because my friend Teresa mentioned that sorry guys, she might be down to just a board. So I've pre-painted this in case you don't have any canvas at home. So obviously if you do have canvas, that's fantastic. If you don't, you can use paper, you can use wood, whatever you like. I have acrylic paints, a whole bunch of different spring colors, and then a little bit of gold. I grabbed some Ziploc bags and some wax paper. And then I have a variety of brushes. This one I found in my basement actually today. So I have a brush from home. I have just some cups for printmaking, and then a whole bunch of different kinds of paintbrushes here, and some palette knives. So literally everything. I know you're thinking, what the heck? What are we going to do? Well, we are going to first do some printmaking and texture work on our boards, and then we're going to do a painting over top and using that texture as an underpainting to create a piece with some negative space. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind before we start is that you will have to decide what color you'd like the majority of your painting to be. I am partial to white. I love doing paint overs with negative space in white when we're just doing like a fun pattern, but it's up to you. Okay, so I want to teach you how to use these bags to start. So let's just open up our paints. I'm using heavy body acrylic museum paint, which you can find at Martin's Framing, and they are open for curbside pickup, which is awesome. Just make sure you go to the right door. I was not at the right door. Anyway, I'm going to use just my paintbrush and do a series of just almost like organic lines, making sort of a little leaf shape here. So don't worry if you just want to watch this for a little bit, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but essentially what we're doing is creating a leaf shape. And this is going to be my first print. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just kind of like a palm or a fern or something like that. And then I'm going to take my print and really, really lightly print it onto my wood. Okay, so the first one is going to be a trial and error for sure. And we want to make sure that if you like that print, you keep going with it. So I just fill in the color exactly where it was if I like it. If I don't like it, you can wipe this off and start again. This is something very similar to jelly plate printing that my friend Pat Whittle is really good at. So we're just going to do a whole bunch of prints all over the page or canvas or wood or whatever you've got. And you can even do a ghost print, which is taking the ink or paint that's already on there and printing it again. So when you're doing printmaking, the first print is usually the one with the most ink or muck on it, and sometimes you discard that because it's so heavy. But then you can see the ghost print creates a little bit of a different texture. So you can see the differences there between all three. Okay, so one thing about this too is that you guys probably have hair dryers at home. I'm not going to use my hair dryer in this tutorial because it's going to be distracting, but I'm trying to make sure that my paint is applied very thinly. Okay, so I'm just going to do one more of this kind of leaf shape. Maybe make it go off the page a little bit. I keep saying page, but really, you know, it's wood. All right. Maybe it'll come back on over here. Okay, so we're going to try and let that layer dry. So the big thing today is layers, 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 layers. I really like layers. The next thing we're going to do, and I'm working on white. I should mention this, that you can start with any color you want. If you want it to be a black background or you have something else in mind, then go for it. Now, although I'm not going to wipe this off, generally you can even just get a baby wipe or something and just kind of remove that paint, or you can just get a cloth and remove it. When it's dry, you can also print on top of this too. So just if you're at home and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have the means, you totally do. You just make it up as you go along. So I've taken off all the wet paint now and it's dry to a touch, so I can actually do a new print on that one. Okay, so we're just moving on to different colors and layers, and I want you to experiment with random shapes. So I'm really sticking to a floral kind of patterning. We're going to get into some other detail in a little bit, but for now, I'm just going to create patterns that are very similar in their sort of organic look. So this time with my pattern, I'm just going to do sort of a straight, kind of a grassy shape. And I'm taking the, you can see that up here. I'm just doing lines, but at the end of the line, as I come up, I'm just taking the pressure off, so it's a little bit thinner at the top. So you can do anything you want. You can do polka dots, you can do stripes, you can do whatever, doesn't matter. Again, I'm just going to print that right onto my page over top of the other ones. So we're just creating a whole bunch of shapes. This may not appeal to you. I know some people are looking for landscapes or portraits or something like that, but stick with me here. It's going to be cool. Try a little ghost print in here. All right, I need to move on. I'm going to do one more with the bag, and then I'm going to show you a different technique. How about, I'm going to actually do blue. I'm just trying to keep these colors fairly similar. For this one, I'm going to actually create a leaf. So I'm going to do my leaf just as like a teardrop shape. And I'm using my palette knife. You can use your finger, you can use literally anything to create sort of this organic shape. And then on it as well, I'm just going to take some of that turquoise and put it in, just to have a different layer within this. So make sure your brush is dried off, and I'm just going to sort of draw in another color. Let's see what happens. We might not like it. That's okay. Release. Release the need to be perfect. Experimentation is 100% the thing that holds people back, and also the thing that makes people the most creative. I find sometimes in the studio people say, well, what now? What's next? What do I need to do? And I can't always answer that question for you. Sometimes it's up to you. But I can give you the tools to get there. All right, I'm going to do one more little pass with the blue. I like how the second one looked a little bit better, so I'm not going to go as heavy with this one, but generally the same little shape with a little turquoise. I know Mother's Day is coming up, and here at the Annex, we've got lots of artists that are home, busy, doing tons of work. So if you're looking for something, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, tell somebody. But you can contact any of us at the Annex. And also, specifically, Tanya List has beautiful bouquets of flowering plants and also brand new cacti that just came in, which are incredible. And it comes with chocolate, which is the best. Okay, so you can see, I'm going to put that aside now. I've overdone the bags. You could leave this like this. It could be a pretty cool picture if you want, but we're going to keep going. So I want to use some paintbrushes now, just because I know that's mostly, if you've come to the channel ready for paint night, you probably have some paintbrushes ready. And so we're going to mix up some color here. I'm just going to use a little bit of yellow and then add some of the turquoise and blue into that, because I want to stay in the same color family. This is all very cool colors right now. I'm going to try and add a little bit of warmth to it and just bring in some yellows and pinks, but I don't want to go too crazy. I don't want to overdo this with color. So I'm going to add yellow and a little bit of white. And then I'm going to grab some of that blue. Now, when you're mixing colors, if you're not familiar with mixing colors, it really, really does depend on your base. So if you're using an ultramarine blue and you mix it with yellow, primary yellow, let's say, then you're going to get a different blue than if you're using phthalo blue, for instance. Like, all the names are different and they all mean different things. When you're mixing a color, I'm going to try and mix up a green here. You want to always add the darker or deeper color to the lighter one, or you're going to go around and around and around trying to mix the color that you want, because it takes way more light paint to add than it does the dark paint to change the color. Now this is looking like a beautiful putrid green. I don't like it. So I'm going to try the turquoise and see what happens. It's not going to go, and that's okay. Take a minute, mix up your paint. I really like working with only a few colors and mixing all of my colors. There we go, that's what I want. Much brighter. I know you can buy colors from the tube, but I feel like sometimes you just really need to mix it up, because you can make it whatever you want. So if that was the only green that I had on hand, then obviously I wouldn't put that green in, number one, but number two, it just wouldn't go with what my color scheme here is. Okay, so I'm going to start using a brush now and show you just a little bit about sort of using a cloth or a sponge brush in a different way so that you can add a little bit of texture. So for me, I'm just going to grab whatever brush I can, think that you might have at home, and I'm just going to take a tiny bit of paint on a dry brush. I'm not adding any water to this because I don't want it to overpower. So I'm just going to go in and kind of circular motions, and every time I go back to the palette, I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white. So it's creating like almost this minty color. And as I brush it on, I'm going to just move around the piece and add a little bit of color here and there. The reason I didn't add the mint right away, or sorry, the reason I didn't add the white right away is because I want it to have sort of a difference of color, and I also want to be able to spread this out a tiny bit so it can go over top. So it almost looks like I printed over top, but it's muted my colors underneath. So I'm just applying the green so it's dark, and there's a lot of paint there to be able to work the white into and mix it in. So if you feel like you have too much on your brush, brush it off on your palette or on a cloth and then go back in. Really want to just apply color here and there. It's not to sort of take over the whole painting. But if there are some areas like I don't love this color, then you can lighten it up a bit by going over top. So the best thing about painting with negative space that we're going to get to in a second is that something like this, if I don't like that in my painting, it probably is not going to make its way to the end. I have lots of ways of covering this up in the future, and right now I'm just kind of making a few areas that are going to pop with color that will come through in my negative painting. So remember, these are all built by the same family because we've got the turquoise that was used in the original turquoise. So it's going to be pleasing to the eye when we see it all together. But we also don't want to be safe. So, well, maybe you do, but I don't. When we experiment with color, we can also take that opportunity to create some space for pops of color. So I'm just going to lay on some of this green up here, so coloring it in a bit more. I want to keep some of the areas around these prints white because every once in a while in my new painting that's going to come in, it's going to have a little peek hole into these colors. You'll understand in a minute. All right, I'm going to put some on top in here too. With acrylic paints, obviously you want them to be really dry before you start layering on the color. If you have the ability to get a hairdryer out, then go for it. Just so you have those different layers. Okay, so you've got printing with bags, you've got, what am I trying to say? Blending. You've got blending, and then what I want to do is use some edges. So I've got my cup and my foam brush, and I want to create some different textures that are going to be a little bit unexpected. So I have this hot pink color that I love. It's very, very thick as a heavy body paint. If you're using paints from the dollar store, you might also be finding that your paint that goes on isn't as thick. It doesn't cover completely. That's okay. Just add more or even add a touch of white to it. Heavy body paint is very thick. It's like soup. So I'm just going to wash my brush here and add a little bit of water to my pink that I've got. So you can see how bright it is. You can hear Tanya getting excited right now. So I'm just watering it down a tiny bit so it can flow better. And I'm going to use this as a printing plate just to dip my my cup into, so I have an area to work off of. So just taking my cup and turning it around and around and around, making sure it's not too crazy. And then again, I'm just going to make some hot pops of color. Okay, if you don't like things to be so perfect, then maybe use something a little bit less circular. Maybe I'll show you with my brush in a second what it could look like. One thing about doing abstract, especially in printmaking, is you don't want to overdo it. You might have already thought that I'm there, which I very well could be. But one thing that I always say to people is that if you're going to use a pattern, like a repetitive print, then don't do it everywhere all over the page, because that will completely disguise everything else that you might want to do with this painting. So using the foam brush, you can either use that edge as a printing. So I'm just going to show you, most likely, well, who knows, I might like it, but I'm going to just show you like a different way to print. You can even do kind of like a grid. If you have a wine cork at home, those are great for printmaking. Now I have lots of them. All right, so I'm just adding a tiny bit of print here. Now I'm going to pretty much be done with that amount of color and that amount of paint right now. So when we talked about negative space, what we're talking about is the spaces between things. So if I am thinking about turning this into a picture of a plant, then I'm not going to paint on the leaves. I'm going to paint the area where the leaves aren't sitting. I'm going to show you just on a piece of paper while this dries a little bit more. And be clear, you can do as many more colors or prints or whatever you want to that underpainting. Go for it, because the more detailed those things are, oh, I forgot one, then the more fun you're going to have with what comes out. Sorry, I can't stop yet. I have to add gold. So great. So I'm just going to take the gold and actually just apply some dots all around. So it's just a hint of gold. You can even color in areas if you want. If you've got gold, you could do this with black. Some people really love sort of that stark black look as well. And this is just to make some areas that will be popping out. And I wanted to get it on before we go to the next step. If you have gold leaf at home, you can get that at the dollar store, really cheap gold leaf, and it's super fine, it's beautiful, it is very delicate to work with, but also a really fun one if you're doing like a three-dimensional piece. All right. Trust me, this is the ugly stage, so I know what you're thinking. This is ugly. Don't worry. One thing that I'm kind of missing is I really love this leaf pattern that we did first, you could go back and reprint the leaves over top, even use a different color, but I really like how that looks. I'm going to leave it for now though, because I don't want to keep you all night in your tutorial. Okay, so when we talk about negative space, if we've got this painting and you've got all of these patterns and everything going on in the background, then you have to think of that as if, one way I think about it is as if it was a piece of paper that was textured already, and essentially what I'm going to do is cut out the shapes. So let's say that I want to make my picture sort of look like, you could even, I mean, we could even make it sort of like a monstera with the split leaves if you want, or you can just have regular leaf shapes. So all of this area, just doing this super quick for an example, but all of the area that is going to be between the leaves is the part that we're going to paint now. So that when we're done, so we're going to come back and paint all of this a color. Okay, so when we're finished, what we're looking at is more of the textured paper, like what we've made with the prints, is coming through as if it was the leaf pattern. So that's why you don't really have to worry about what everything looks like so much right now. Okay, so let's pretend that that's going to be sort of our goal, is some organic shape. And because you're at home, you can grab a plant that's next to you, grab a vase of flowers, whatever it is, and we're going to use that as inspiration as we move to the next step. So I'm going to choose the area that I like the best, which is this zone right here. I don't love this zone, so I want to make sure that in my picture, whatever I'm doing, that my pops of color come out. The challenge though is that I'm not drawing around those things. I'm literally creating a pattern to go on top. So if you're nervous about this, some people don't like freehand painting. I totally understand that. And what you could do is, let's say you just wanted a regular leaf shape. So why not cut out a pattern for yourself and lay it on? So anything that's going to be under that paper is now going to be completely covered and will be what we see instead of the negative space around it. Okay, so if you're feeling nervous, cut yourself a pattern. Make sure that you do a little sketch like I did, and you measure it to your paper, and then you can just cut it out and we'll go from there. If you're okay with freehanding, then we're gonna keep going forward. So I'll show you with the little pattern here first. I'm going to turn it so that I can get some of this in my vase. So I'm going to just draw right onto my piece here. And it really doesn't matter if you scratch into the paint. It's obviously not going to be amazing if you do that, but it gives you an idea, if your paint's still wet, where these things are going to go. I'm going to try and get almost like a monstera shape. If you have chalk, ideal situation to use chalk, because you really just, you don't want to destroy your painting. But we're going to basically, I don't know if you can see that, I have like a little vase shape around this pattern. I kind of like that as being the bottom of my vase. And then I've done a leaf way up here. I'm going to try and make that into a monstera leaf. And as I said before, I really love working with white. So we're going to get our white paint. If you don't like white, use purple, use blue, use anything you like, use cream color. But we are going to now paint in around our shape. So for me, I'll just show you an example. You're going to be very, very liberal with your paint. So for my shape, I'm going right up against my vase that I've created. and I'm literally just applying the paint so that I have a guideline. So that's literally my base that's going to be on the bottom. Okay, and then I'm just kind of spreading the paint out from there. So the first coat is not necessary to be totally dry. You can do a second coat of white on top of this, or brown or black or whatever the heck your color is going to be. But the point is that we're moving into this negative space. Okay, so I don't really care that it's turning pink or green right now. Ideally, dry your painting before you start going crazy. But now we're thinking about how the shapes of the leaves are going to come out. So I have my little drawing here that I'm following, and then I'm doing white basically all the way up to it. I kind of like it when it does have a little bit of color to it. It looks like it wasn't sort of a disguise, a mess that you made. But you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want with your white. I guess the point is that you're muting it. You're muting the background completely. So it is taking up some of that color. All right, so we're just going to go around the whole painting, and then and I'll show you just with that pattern. Here it is. Let's say I wanted to do a shape that was a little bit more rigid. I would lay down my pattern shape and then just go around the edges. And you don't have to go all the way around because maybe it's going to overlap another area. But if you feel a little bit more confident making sure that you have a shape to follow, then I would start with a pattern. Are you getting the idea? I know it's not your traditional paint night. I actually have a tutorial on our website right now for adult painting, and negative painting is one of the ones that we explore with different things like landscapes and still life, a whole bunch of different stuff, just as something different to do. It also trains your brain to think a little bit differently when you're looking at the opposite. All right, so I'm just going to finish up here in the top, and I just need to do some adjustments. Obviously, it's a suggestion of a picture. It's not going to look perfect, but I need to just make some adjustments here so it does look like it's sort of a plant that's come through. So keep working. If you need to cut in on your leaves, I had my other leaf looking a little bit more like a monstera, so I'm just going to cut these in a little bit, round it out. And it just gives you some light in here. This one already has quite a bit of white, so I'm not going to add too much more in there. Now if you go back and you think, I way overdid it with the white, that's okay. Sometimes just leave it. I think that that's sort of my mantra lately, has been just don't worry about it. Just go, just totally go with it. Go with your gut instinct. If you feel like you want to go back and paint more over, I'm just urging you, please don't, because that's the stage where you can get really, really finicky with your work and kind of ruin the effect that you've already made. And I just think sometimes less is more. So now we want to just go back and look at the white space. So is the white or the pinks or the greens or anything that's not pure, is it distracting my eye away from initially what I want it to be looking at and suggesting that that's a plant in a pot? Is it too much white? Is it too bright? Do I need to tone it down a little bit? You have to sort of play with lights and darks and just see what attracts your eye. A really great thing for any kind of painting, I find, is to take your phone, take a picture of it, turn it into grayscale, and play with value, light and darks. So if you're happy with this, great, leave it. If you feel like it needs a little bit more, or maybe it needs like an extra, I don't know, a little bit of just a muted bit to cover up your pot area, maybe you just need to do a few more adjustments. But essentially, that's a lot of work for a negative space painting. So thank you for being with me today. I hope you had fun. It's a little bit different. It's something totally unique. And the more you practice these things, the more you become deliberate at what's going to be underneath for your individual painting. My advice, especially if you just watch this all the way through and now you're going to go back and paint, is think about color combinations, color families, what appeals to you. So look around your house, look at all the colors that you have in your house, and then maybe think about what is an alternate color that I can add that would help that painting pop. I just realized I don't like that part. Okay, so I want you to play, have a good time. Thanks for joining me for Art Night, and we'll see you at the first of the next month. If not in the studio, then back online. Have a great night, everybody.